Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. There's the 224s that we were looking for yesterday. Finally got around to that. Good morning, everybody. A little out of sorts this morning. Nothing too serious, just discombobulated in the morning. Got to get the alarm set to make sure everything is going to work properly. And, you know, why should anything work properly, really? Honestly, at this point, we should just let it go. All right, well, I've set something to the world clock now, so the good news is, I don't know, what's a world clock exactly? I guess I can get any time zone and put it on here, but I only have the one, so what's the point, really? All right, all of our alarms are set. I think all of the things silenced, so we'll just have that gentle chiming to remind us of when to take our breaks. It is Wednesday. It's primary season, so that means a Wednesday after a Tuesday, which means, well, that's when Wednesdays usually come. But in this case, a Wednesday after a Tuesday that held one of the primary contests. It was New Hampshire, the first of the primary contests. It used to be the primary contest that came first for everybody, or at least the two major parties in this country. But one of the major parties said, to hell with that. Let's try doing our first one somewhere else. The Republicans, of course, the Conservative Party, I guess, they used to be the Conservative Party, said, let's not try anything, and decided to hold their primary, continue to hold their primary first there. That was yesterday. They were down to two major candidates. One was the guy who was the insurrectionist who should have been thrown off the ballot under the 14th Amendment, and the other was the person who supports that guy, Nikkki Haley. So, Meatball Ron DeSantis, the sanctimonious, whatever, was out, and good riddance because no one was interested in him. And that left Nikkki Haley to collect all the points that weren't being thrown Donald Trump's way. And with a surprising performance. I hadn't really, despite the fact that Greg comes on and tells me what the polls are each day, I hadn't really been committing them to memory. And so yesterday, my brother Mark was asking, what's the story here? How is Nikkki Haley expected to do? Is she going to drop out? Is she going to stay in? And I took a look at the polls, and the polls were saying, oh, you know what? She's garnering, depending on the poll, 30-40% of the vote at this point, which I guess, you know, stands to reason given that everybody else has dropped out. And then I figured, all right, well, next up, or one of the next up, is South Carolina. That's her home state. So now I guess the only question is she going to stay in and suffer the possible humiliation of losing South Carolina, which was supposed to be, I guess, in her mind, when she started this thing, her big triumph? Or does she bow out so that it doesn't happen? Or does she say, well, you know, now that I'm the last one left, I mean, what did she do, like 45, 46% in New Hampshire? So she might be thinking, well, if in the first couple of early contests, I don't have to win those states, but I mean, if I'm getting 40%, I'm getting some delegates. Is that right? I don't know, but I forget how the Republican system works. So, I don't know. I guess we could look it up, but honestly, I've never cared that much about who won the Republican nominations, at least not in these early contests. But we can figure that one out. And I guess the other question is, does she now become the target of his wrath, and can she stand that, or does she want to try to preserve, I don't know what, some insiderism with Trump? I imagine he's not furious with her, or hasn't been furious with her exactly the same way he always was with DeSantis. But that's because I guess he figured she was going to go away earlier. Now, I guess he'll turn on the attacks. I don't know whether she has. I couldn't think anybody who ran against him would have any hope as a vice presidential candidate. I don't think she's really cut out for this one. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how she decides to handle this thing. She's put on a good performance. She can go out on a high note, but we'll let Greg collect the stories and figure that one out, because there's so much else that's happening today. And I think we're still adjourned at the moment in court in New York in the Jean Carroll case, which makes it sound a lot more like somebody's really got COVID after all. The juror who was not feeling well, and then Alina Habba not feeling well. It was not disclosed. I don't think anybody knew at that point. There was some report that Alina Habba was testing negative, at least in the early stages, for COVID. No update there, but not only did they suspend proceedings yesterday, but I think they decided to take the day off today, too, even though Trump was, I guess, scheduled to come back and attend court and maybe even testify during the proceedings now that the New Hampshire contest is over. All right, so we'll get our bearings and get all our stories straight and line up any ducks that feel like standing in line. I don't really want to force you into a row, but if you felt like volunteering to stand in a row, that would be very helpful. But Greg Dworkin is here, and he speaks duck, so I think this will work out pretty well. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So also don't hatch at your counts before they chicken.
Yes. What? Okay. Basket, eggs, deplorables.
It's all about poultry. So,
I think you're right.
The
Avian
thing
flu.
about New Hampshire is that it pretty much played out the way we thought it was going to play out.
That's good.
And the question's going to be how you interpret it.
Yes. Oh, I did forget to mention, New Hampshire Republicans are a weird and different breed, and you might not find the same ones elsewhere.
Oh, you absolutely won't. Not only is Iowa not like New Hampshire isn't like the rest of the United States. And in fact, New Hampshire isn't even like New Hampshire. New Hampshire isn't the flinty New England. You have to use the word flinty when you describe New Hampshire.
Yeah, right.
That's not really New Hampshire. Right?
Okay. Yeah, I don't feel like it is.
You got a bunch of massholes who moved up there. And so part of the southern part of New Hampshire is like the really worst of the worst. And then New Hampshire also has the best of the best. And it's a mix. And interestingly, they don't report by county. They report by city and town. So when you wait for election results, you have to wait for each individual township
Yeah, that's
report.
A northeastern thing.
Yeah. So by the time you get it all in, you wind up seeing Trump with 54.6% of the vote, and Haley gets 43.
Okay.
Now, is 43 a lot? It depends what you were expecting.
Yes.
The race
then yes.
is functionally over, but Nikkki Haley pulled a thing from Bill Clinton's playbook when he finished second, ran out in front of the cameras before anybody else and said, "I'm the comeback kid." And Haley essentially did the same thing, and Trump wanted to put her away last night. Not only did he not, but she captured the media attention to no avail because she's not going anywhere. We'll get to that. But it really pissed Trump off. And you were saying in the intro, he hasn't really attacked her yet. He attacked her last night. He was so pissed off.
Yay.
Completely lost control, was screaming at her dress. I mean, it was
nice. I missed
one of those things to see.
Okay. Dang. Well, I haven't.
So let's start out with some of the analysis. Trump wins by 11 points. So the 20-point polls were wrong. The 2-point polls were wrong. The average was, about where it turned out. So if you want to average all the polls, ignore ARG's 2 and ignore Suffolk's, close to 20, the averages were okay. That's the trouble with averages. They don't tell you that it's average, 10 or 11 because one of them said 2 and the other one said 20, and they were way off.
Yeah.
But the averages were okay, and that's why people look at averages. Fine.
Okay.
All right. So it's an 11-point win. And Trump, in effect, was the incumbent.
Yes. Sure,
okay?
I see what you mean.
So my point is, Joe Biden had a really good night yesterday. He did very well in the primary, and then he did even better on the Democratic side.
Ah.
In the Democratic side, Biden got more votes as a write-in than Obama got when he was running for re-election with his name on the ballot.
Really?
And
Okay.
Dean Phillips,
That's fine.
I sent you a clip. I don't know if you have time to play it. It's only 40 seconds.
I don't know. Oh, all right. Well, let's see. It'll take some doing, but let me go look for it.
And basically the setup there is that they're interviewing people. about, why did you write in Biden? Well, I wanted to support him and so on that. Well, what about Dean Phillips?
Yeah.
And so the woman who they're interviewing said, yeah, what about him?
Right.
And the reporter said, well, he's made all sorts of inroads trying to reach you because Biden's not on the ballot. Are you still unmoved? And she said, oh, I'm unmoved, all right. In fact, I just find Phillips annoying.
Oh,
just
okay.
brushed him off like a fly.
Wow.
And that's about what happened yesterday on the Democratic side.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's about what we figured was going to happen. So this clip is, where is it in one of the, embedded in one of the stories? Bottom. Oh, okay.
It says New Hampshire voter who wrote in Biden, I was unwavering. I actually found him annoying. It's just above that, 46.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. It's embedded in Twitter. Oh, well, I have to go to that
makes
place.
It even more. Biden gets 51.6% of the vote, and Phillips gets 19.7%, and basically nobody cares.
Okay. I could see where that might be the case. Let's see. Can I get this thing?
Yeah, while you're looking to get these things, let me tell you about Mike Madrid and what he said before we had the results.
All right.
And he says, look, let's talk a little bit more about why anti-Trump GOPers in Iowa and New Hampshire matter. Mm-hmm. First is Iowa, a state that's dominated by white evangelicals in the GOP primary, Trump's strongest base, giving him 81% of the votes in 2020. And then second is New Hampshire, a state that has a higher than the national average of white, non-college educated voters. He's making the point here, this is Trump country, on the GOP side at least.
Okay.
AP Votecast, that's the Associated Press exit poll, tells us fully 20% of GOP voters saying they won't vote Trump. And that's truly extraordinary.
Yes.
And suggests true weakness in the Republican base.
Ooh, I love when they have true weakness. Yes.
Right. And it turns out Wall Street Journal actually had those exact numbers. The share of primary voters that said they would or wouldn't vote for Trump if he's the nominee, this is on the Republican side. Sources AP Votecast. Republican and leaning Republican, 65% were satisfied with Trump. 15% said they're dissatisfied, but they'll still support him. So that's 80%.
Okay.
And he loses 20. He loses 19%, dissatisfied and will not support.
Okay.
That's on the Republicans. For independents, it's even more stark. 26% are satisfied, 7% are dissatisfied, but will still support. 66% will not support.
Wow. Okay. I hope that
These are
true.
New Hampshireites voting
flinty in
a Republican primary, giving a very flinty, response to Trump. Very New York response to Trump.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true, too.
Okay. So Trump getting 50% of the vote isn't in and of itself a bad sign for Trump or a good sign for Trump. The key data point is that 20% of non-Trump GOP voters are saying they won't vote for him. That is going to translate to about 15 to 17% of core Republican voters. And remember, in 2020, Mike Madrid, coined the term the Bannon line to explain Trump losing. If he loses 4 to 7% of GOP voters, he's going to lose the election.
Uh-huh.
The Bannon line projection in 2020 was, in fact, correct. He actually lost 9% of the GOP vote. It was closer because Biden also lost ground with Latinos, African Americans, and other non-white voters. That's a different issue for a different day. But New Hampshire's going to tell us more about non-college educated blue-collar workers that are not evangelicals. And that's important because his weakness will be from a different part of his base. He was weak with evangelicals in Iowa. He's going to be weak with college non-evangelicals in New Hampshire, not in the sense that he'll lose them. He's going to win the vast majority of them. But the question, is how many of them he loses. And he said beforehand, if she gets 40%, Haley gets 40% of the vote, that has a wide election impact between 10, 15, or 20% of those Republicans saying they won't vote for Trump. And in fact, it was 19. And in fact, she got 43.
Yes.
So that's the key metric to look at. Not if she wins, not how big the spread is. It's how much of her vote is anti-Trump. And fully 50% of the vote was anti-Trump in the tracking polls for Suffolk prior to the election.
Mm-hmm.
So those who were pro-Haley are going to vote for Trump. And those who are anti-Trump, I'm not voting for Haley, I'm voting against Trump, he's not going to get those.
All right.
Now, every single one of them, no. But that's not the point, as he pointed out. You need to lose 7-8% of the GOP to lose the election, and now we're talking about 19. So let's say it's only half of that.
Okay. I mean,
Right?
no,
Let's say it's
I
only
want all of
9.
the 19. But okay, it could happen.
That's enough.
All right. I hope so. I hope it's enough again this time.
Right. So a political playbook was interesting because prior to the election results yesterday, John Harwood had written, the zeitgeist is changing. We're about to see a shift in the media coverage from Biden has all these problems to Trump has all these problems. Watch for it. And in fact, that's what happened. We talked a little bit about that on Monday. But today, so we get, Trump wins. But let's be clear about what happened here. First off, says Playbook, Haley failed. A week and a half ago, she had a credible plan. Come in second in Iowa, beat Trump in New Hampshire. It was the only way to make this a race. And getting close to second or third in Iowa doesn't count. Getting close to half the vote in New Hampshire doesn't count.
Well,
and she didn't get close to half the vote. She got 43.
On her goal.
But you could hardly blame her for spinning the results positively last night. What was more revealing was Trump's reaction. He rage posted about her speech in real time on Truth Social. Delusional in capital letters. When he came on stage at his own event 30 miles south in Nashua, he could barely contain his anger. Gone was the sunny Trump of Iowa caucus night. Trump began his remarks with a falsehood. He claimed to have won New Hampshire in both primary and general election, which he didn't.
Yeah, sure, right. Why not?
Hillary beat him there in 2016, and Biden won in 2020. There was a particularly noteworthy claim at the top, given the subject of his remarks, the fact that Haley did a speech like she won, even though she lost by 11 points. Isn't that your typical victory speech, he warned, and he was right. As the clear victor, he had one job, ignore Haley, focus on Biden, unite the party, and he couldn't. He couldn't let it go. He attacked her as unelectable. He suggested, and by the way, this is really good for those of you who still thought somehow that Trump wasn't going to be the nominee, and still thought somehow, despite listening to this show, that Haley was a candidate for VP. He attacked her as unelectable. He suggested New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu uses drugs. He hinted darkly that she would be under investigation for a little stuff she doesn't want to talk about. He mocked her outfit. That fancy dress probably wasn't so fancy after all.
Oh, no.
Then he gave the mic to Vivek Ramaswamy in order to attack Haley because they hate each other.
Fun.
And then Haley's campaign was pleased because they got under Trump's skin. Why is he so angry? For somebody who's not threatened by Nikkki, he sure talks about her every chance he gets. And, of course, the Biden team was cheered by the drama. That's the guy we'll beat. That's the guy.
Yeah. All right.
So the exit polls revealed potential weaknesses for both Biden and Trump. We all know that. 10% of voters who cast a ballot in the Democratic primary said they wouldn't ultimately back Biden. But that number was, and again, you got to figure whatever they say now, it's half of that. The number was much larger for Trump. 33% of voters who participated in the Republican primary said they wouldn't support Trump if he were the nominee.
Mm-hmm, right. So again, even if you figure half, that's huge.
Right. That gap could just be a function of more Democrats and anti-Trump independents. But for all the talk of Biden weakness with his own party, the exit polls show far more division and factionalism within the GOP. Republicans in disarray. Can you imagine that?
No, I don't have the typesetting guys don't have that.
Right. While she insists she'll make a last stand in South Carolina, the exit polls also included one stat that's ominous for Haley's chances going forward. She received the support of 25% of self-described Republicans who voted yesterday.
Okay.
You can't win the Republican nomination if you can't win Republicans.
No.
So basically, what does this all mean? She's done. She's finished. But luckily for Biden, she'll stay in the race. She'll claim she's viable. Whether she drops out before South Carolina to save embarrassment, as you pointed out in the intro, or whether she doesn't, it's all a function of one thing. Ron DeSantis dropped out because people stopped giving him money. He said, you're a loser, we're not doing this. If that happens to Haley, she's done. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If the gullible GOP donors who don't have a lick of sense about politics.
Yes. Sometimes they don't.
Continue to give her money, she's in until South Carolina. If they stop giving her money, she's out.
Yes. Well, yeah.
And that's the one thing that's going to decide when she drops out. but she's not going to be the nominee. She's not going to be the vice presidential candidate. She'll do Biden a favor by attacking Trump, by honing in on his weaknesses, by pointing out, how he's a petulant little boy. And Trump will spend a lot of time attacking her, which would be great for Biden because basically, again, the point at this stage in the primary drama, the arc of the story, is to try to start uniting your party. And Trump is doing the opposite. Haley's doing the opposite. They're attacking each other. That's wonderful for Democrats.
Yes.
Okay. Biden has a lot to do. He's got a lot of work to do in order to, unite the Democratic Party, but they're not nearly as divided as the Republicans are. And the Indies just don't want to have anything to do with Trump. And that's what's going to lose in the election because Indies always decide elections.
Well, good. I mean, I don't.
So that's basically what happened in New Hampshire yesterday.
I'm glad they don't like him. That's a pretty good summary of it. I think it's interesting how compressed still the primary calendar is, and the tremendous media pressure to have the narrative be that the race is over after two contests. But I understand why it is.
They want a race. They want a horse race. They need people to watch until months from now.
It is weird.
So they don't want it.
They usually do declare it over anyway. So they reluctantly declare this race over. But some odd effects, after effects of being the last one left. Money continues to flow at least for a while, especially if you are, the hometown hero, or possible loser in one of the upcoming contests. And of course, the Super Tuesday contest states want desperately for there to still be a contest on Super Tuesday so that people pay attention to them. So there's a path for continuing to fund them, but that's really probably the bottom line. Like the idea of her, it's a real thing for her to consider dropping out before South Carolina to save the embarrassment. But then you probably felt it as it got mentioned. What do these guys know about being able to or even wanting to avoid embarrassment? Nothing. They're running against Donald Trump. So
do you remember 2012?
No. What happened?
There was a Republican primary to run against Obama.
Okay. Yes. Okay. That part of 2012. Sure.
Do you remember who won?
In New Hampshire or the whole thing?
The primary.
Yeah.
And that was?
Mitt Romney.
And who came in second?
No.
That's the point. Rick Santorum?
I don't know. Well, maybe McCain?
Rick Santorum, was like the last one standing.
Was he?
I think.
Well, he was barely standing.
He released his delegates ahead of the RNC to vote for Romney, and 9 delegates cast their votes for Santorum anyway. See, the point is you don't remember.
Yeah. No, although now that you've said, obviously now that you've said it, I guess I don't remember it, but I do remember that.
What about 2016? 2016 was a little bit, closer in the time scale there.
Yeah.
So 2016, Donald Trump wins the nomination. Who came in second?
No idea. Is that not right? I thought that was Rick Santorum.
That was Ted Cruz.
Okay. Right.
Nobody remembers who finished second. And so you can try to make this last until the convention, and it doesn't matter.
No, I don't think she's got it in her to do that. But there is, like you were telling the story of the Clinton version, the comeback kid thing. Well, okay, in the end, he didn't come in second. Had he come in second, you wouldn't remember him. But
he didn't come in second in the primary, but he came in second in New Hampshire.
Yes, that's the issue, is that sometimes people do turn things around. A surprisingly strong but losing finish in one of the early states very often makes a candidacy, but it hasn't for a while, but it has in the past. But now I'm remembering the Rick Santorum thing. But he actually tried to dine out on that for the longest time. I finished second in the primary, and he thought that
CNN should hire me.
Yeah, right. That was his argument, was that he was a real personage in the Republican Party because he came in second in the Republican primary, the contest to come in second in the presidential election. You lost to the loser of the presidential election. But yes, I recall him, and of course being all over the air giving commentary on everything and then realizing this guy hasn't actually won an election for 15 years at the point that he's on the air. And it's now like they still put him on the air. It's now 25 years that this guy hasn't won an election.
Right.
But, okay,
wait,
whatever.
But it's so long you probably don't remember. He didn't live in the state he was running in.
Right. And I remember because the state he was living in was mine and we wanted him out. I guess he's still here. Right. So it didn't work. Okay. Wow. Well, all right. That wraps it up. I guess we get a pretty clear picture of what's going on. I now kind of wish I had seen Trump rant about Haley because.
Well, there's YouTube. You still could.
Yeah, I'll get the chance.
Not during the show, but
I don't know. Says you. I might just go ahead and do it and violate all the copyrights.
Well, you might, but at the same time, listen to some of these. I'm not voting for Phillips. Who's he? Voters.
All right. Yeah. Oh, I've got. Well, oh God. I'll see if I can play that. I started it rolling and it was like really.
Well, we got
quiet.
a break coming up.
Yeah. Might be able to engineer it.
That part out.
Sure. Why not? Well, first I got to play this other music, but not just yet. About 20 seconds. You want to count down so that we have something to fill the time?
You mean from 20 backwards?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Trump couldn't do it.
No, that's true. Yeah, I got to look for that rant. Yeah, she seems
2019 hamburger.
It's about how it would go too. And well, there's a story in the news today that might actually explain some of his degeneration. Now that I think about it. But we'll tease that for later on. We'll be back. I think we're done with New Hampshire like forever, so we don't have to worry about it. And a big night for the pencil industry on the write-in side in the Democratic contest. Good news for them, and we'll be right back after this with more. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We took our break. I did some, quickie engineering, and I think if I mess with the volume on this side, it won't mess with your volume, and I can boost it up, and I can play that clip if you want.
Yeah,
roll that clip about the complaining people that didn't want to hear anything about Dean Phillips. Okay.
Not on the ballot, but supporters can write it
it's only in one ear.
There's
That's
one
what's going
Democratic
on.
voter who did just that.
Sound is pretty good.
Wrote in Joe Biden.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Were you disappointed that his name actually wasn't on the ballot, or was that a secondary issue to you?
Disappointed, but very happy to vote for him by writing his name in.
Yeah. Obviously, Dean Phillips hit this state very, very hard, trying to, really take advantage of the fact that Joe Biden was not on the ballot. Did any of that campaigning get through to you, matter to you, or were you unwavering the whole time?
I was unwavering, and I actually found him annoying.
Not on the ballot, but supporters can
Well,
write it
okay.
in.
And it'll replay now. But all right.
Right.
See, found him
that's
annoying.
The point, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, David, but
I know nothing.
Joe Biden's name was not on the ballot. Did you know Joe Biden's name wasn't on the ballot? I'm going to ask this voter over here who voted for Joe Biden, and I'm going to remind her Joe Biden's name wasn't on the ballot. I wonder if Joe Biden's name not being on the ballot made any difference. You know, you got to love our media.
Yes, I find that annoying, actually. But yeah, that was kind of interesting, and yeah, a little bit of I think probably a interviewing mistake there too. If you're like, I'm just trying to get the opinion of the person on the street here. But what did he say? Were you unwavering? Yeah, I was unwavering.
Yeah, but you know, it's that was the word I would have picked. Had you not said anything, I would have used unwavering. But also, I would have worked in scofflaw because that doesn't really play into it. But I just love that word. Yes. And so let me give you a list of other words I would like to use in this interview.
Yes. And by the way, have you heard of Phil Crow?
Wasn't letting her speak her mind. He was trying to set up this story, and it's just so obvious. That's what I mean. And she's having none of it. So look, I'm voting for him. Why are you bringing up all this other garbage? Yeah. I know he wasn't on the ballot. I live here.
Yeah. And I have a pencil. And they were giving him out.
I'm a concerned voter who came out here to vote for him. Of course I know his name wasn't on the ballot. I just saw the ballot.
That's true. That's true. Yes, I just come out from there. Did you know that Joe Biden wasn't on the ballot?
Whether or not he was on the ballot 9 times. What point are you trying to make to your audience?
That would have been an answer, right? Was it disappointing to you that Joe Biden wasn't on the ballot? Oh, he was on the ballot. No, he wasn't.
He was on the.
Yeah, he did. I put him there.
To me, is you asked me about it 9 times, but then they wouldn't have played it.
Yeah, I guess not. They had to look for somebody in a blue hat. I don't know. It was okay.
That there is what's wrong with our political media, right there in that capsule. That's why I thought that interview was so important. The voter's fine.
Yeah.
The reporter is trying to make a story where there isn't a story. Biden did fine. There's nothing to talk about on the Democratic side. It wasn't even a sanctioned primary. It was basically a straw vote.
That's the thing is, I mean, there's a story there. You know, you could,
if that's what you want to do.
I mean, right. If you need to justify the hotel bill or something, talk about the process story on the other side. But right, who did you vote for? Who the hell do you think I voted for? I mean, come on. Oh, but were you tempted at all by Dean Phillips? He spent a lot of time here. No, wasn't. I mean, but you knew that because polls. You paid $1 million to have polls tell you that he had 4% or less, and you know, what do you think happened? You think you found one of the 4%? No,
I don't know.
Right.
So, you know,
interesting.
There's that. Now, let me talk about a different sort of set of circumstances.
Do you have video?
Here. All right. No video.
Okay.
This is all from the Pundit Roundup.
Then go ahead.
This is a really interesting fellow. At least I find him interesting. He's a conservative. You're not going to like his politics at all.
Is he a callow fellow?
Callow? Well, he's actually an experienced fellow. He was a former Senate staffer to Marco Rubio, to John Thune, Arlen Specter.
What?
Guy's been around. I don't think you can call him callow.
His name is
Greg Nunziata, and he posts on Twitter.
Hello.
And basically, what he said is, look, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but when he was elected, I hoped for the best and had to be proven wrong. I didn't vote for him in 2020. His presidency had some upside, so I understood why others voted for him. Read that in as low taxes, and I get that my fellow Republicans are racist. He didn't say that, though. What he said is, I understood why others voted for him. After Election Day 2020 and after January 6th, I'm out of excuses. I can't make any excuses for my fellow Republicans. And I just thought it was really interesting because there really are never Trumpers.
Yes.
Right? People tend to blow them off and say, yeah, but you'll come around in the end, or you're just posturing. And
yes,
you're just doing
I do say that.
No. Look at this guy's pedigree, and there's nothing in it for him to say this in public.
Guess not. He's maybe not even still working in the business. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sure he's not. He's got his own PR firm now.
No, well, I guess that's still the business. But okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so somebody said to him, well, what would you say, assuming you had to convince him, to Trump supporters that say January 6th wasn't an insurrection and it's all blown out of proportion? Mm-hmm. And Nunziata goes on to say, well, I think January 6th doesn't really matter to my case. The President of the United States told his supporters on the day before the election that if he lost, it could only be because of fraud. And when he lost, he declared victory. and that's disqualifying. That's impeachable. And that all happened
Yes.
before January 6th.
Yes. And when we say disqualifying, we mean, in the end, also disqualifying under the 14th Amendment.
Exactly.
Adding in January 6th. Okay.
Now,
sure.
what we don't know, everybody
don't
said,
we
okay,
know?
well, what do you think about Rubio? And, of course, Daddy refused to answer.
Well, that's a ways back anyway. Yeah, okay.
Right? And that was my question, too. But I didn't ask him because I know he's not going to answer that in public. Hey, you want to DM me and tell me what you think of Rubio? That's okay. I promise I won't tell anybody but David
Oh,
on the show.
I'm going to leak. Forget it. Don't tell me. Okay.
Right? So I just think it was really, really fascinating. And so, this did we cover? I guess not, because this is a Tuesday Dateline here. Donald Trump has a big problem ahead, says Sam Stein and Natalie Allison in Politico. A whole swath of GOP voters appears firmly committed to not voting for Trump in November.
Yes, that looks good for now.
Right? I can't vote for Trump. He's a crook. He's too corrupt, said Scott Simeon, 64, an independent voter from Amherst, who backed Trump in 2016 and 2020. I voted for him. I didn't realize he's corrupt as he is.
Well, duh. But okay.
Right.
Thank
so
you.
primary elections can create inter-party divisions. If you ever remember, do you remember Puma?
Yes, I do.
2008.
Yes. Uh-huh.
They threatened to derail Barack Obama because Hillary Clinton didn't want to. Remember that?
Yes. Well, they wanted to threaten to derail Obama.
It didn't work.
Right.
Right. So sometimes you have a division and it doesn't work. Sometimes with Bernie and Hillary, sometimes it may matter. Although I don't think that was the real issue. I think the real issue is Hillary couldn't get enough votes from other people. But sometimes you have a real division within the party, and it makes a difference. Like when Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
I think that cost him the election.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of analysis leans that way.
Whereas
That one
I
worked out
don't
very
think
differently.
that George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton was affected in any way, shape, or form by Ross Perot. I think that was all a media circus.
And what a circus it was.
And what a circus
Looking
it
back
was.
on that one. Okay.
So, as events across the Granite State over the past week, surrogates for Trump have stressed the need for Republican reconciliation. Surrogates for Trump were stressing this prior to last night's vote. And what happened at last night's vote? Haley declares she had a moral victory, and Trump lost it.
Okay.
That's not Republican reconciliation, my friends.
Okay. That's true.
Reconciliation are people too, said Miss Romney. But
They don't like
no.
reconciliation. I thought they were against that.
Yeah. Curtis Thornburg, 81, an independent from Ringe, had voted for Barry Goldwater, Bob Dole, both Bushes, and then Obama and Biden. He was open to backing Haley, but couldn't see himself supporting Trump. I can't find anything good to say, and I try. He's dangerous, and the people around him too.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
Forbes Farmer, 79.
Forbes
What a
Farmer.
name, Forbes Farmer from Flinty, New Hampshire.
Wow. Mr. Farmer. Okay. Well, I don't know. You can't get there from here. I know that.
Yeah. What are your politics? Well, I'm a capitalist tool.
But as a farmer.
A fellow independent from Ringe also went to view Haley at the event. He said he'd lean toward supporting her if she ran against Biden in November. Could he back Trump? No, never. I hate Trump.
Okay. That's nice.
Can't convince me. Well, these people will come around a bit. This guy is not coming around.
Not Forbes Farmer.
Capitalist tool. He's not.
He's what kind of tool? He's a farmer. He's a capitalist hoe.
Capitalist tool used to be the old tagline for Forbes magazine.
Sure.
For those of you who are unsure what magazines are, they're actually these paper products that would open up in your hand like a book, and you'd read them, and they'd come like weekly or monthly.
Yes.
They're like I don't know, how shall I describe this? Vinyl records that spin around on a turntable.
Right, but with perfume samples.
They're old things.
Yep.
They're like newspapers that where
you
the
might have
print
seen
comes
them
off on your hand.
at your doctor's
I know you
office.
kids don't know about these things, but I just thought I would tell you.
Right. You might have seen them at your doctor's office, but this, of course, was also before the day that they installed cable television
And
flat
that you
panel
went to your
TVs
doctor
instead.
virtually.
Yeah, right. And now you call in and exactly. Or you just do a drive-through thing at the urgent care.
Yeah. See, I'm old, folks. I'm just
I
telling
know.
you.
There was the magazines. They used to keep them in their black bags when they came to your house. Sure.
So the irony of Trump's angry reaction to his New Hampshire primary victory by Steve Bannon
Is that
on
ironic?
MSNBC.
Okay.
Let me get this straight. Donald Trump, of all people, is outraged by the very of a candidate presenting a second-place finish as a success.
The very something.
The very
Something's
concept
missing.
of a candidate presenting
good.
a second-place finish as a success. That's what he said.
Okay.
And, you stole my, thunder here.
Thunder, right.
For speechwriters, remarks after a primary victory are an easy lift. The speeches practically write themselves. Candidates thank their supporters. They express their appreciation to the campaign staff. They congratulate their rivals, especially defeated rivals. And then they say a few words about the road ahead.
Right. I don't even know if they write those speeches. I think they might wing them.
You don't have to. I mean, they write themselves.
Yeah, there you go.
It was ChatGPT before there was AI. They just pop out,
ChatGPT, what should I say? I just won New Hampshire.
Right.
Well,
Donald Trump could have stuck to this template after winning New Hampshire by roughly 11 points, but as Politico noted, the former president went in a very different direction.
Right. Forbes farmer, screw you. I hate your guts.
Reflecting on his reaction to the former ambassador's remarks, Trump told supporters, I said, wow, she's doing a speech like she won. She didn't win, she lost. Let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a bad night. She had a very bad night. It was quite a speech. During relatively brief remarks, the likely GOP nominee not only slammed Haley for appearing pleased about the results, he referenced unnamed Haley's scandals that she doesn't want to talk about and took aim at her attire.
All right. That's Trump for you. I wonder what
And then the former president concluded, I don't get too angry, I get even. Now, that is so important in so many different ways.
Help.
But the first thing that struck me when I saw that is all you people out there, because you're Democrats and you're bedwetters.
Yeah.
We all are. We're Democrats.
Oh.
We fret. That's what we do.
All right.
I'm worried that you're Democrats, right. F-R-E-T. Right? What if Haley is the nominee? Biden will have a much harder time. You don't understand. If Haley ever were the nominee, which isn't going to happen, MAGA would walk.
Yes. I mean,
Trump
would
do
don't
to
walk,
Haley what he's doing
they would get on their scooters.
now. He would absolutely trash her. That doesn't mean that she's ruined because Trump says so. It means that she's ruined because Trump takes his voters and he leaves the party.
Yeah, I mean, not hard
Which
to
is
imagine.
exactly why every single Republican who's an elected is sucking up to him. That's what all of that means.
Yes.
He doesn't get mad, he gets even. Everything is encapsulated in that. That's what's going on.
No, I was just thinking more along even general election lines. Like, again, he's once again saying, I'm going to throw law and the Constitution out the window and murder my rivals. You bet. I get even. That's what I do. So threatening his second term agenda as well as letting people know, I'll take my voters and walk. I say it's not hard to imagine, even though, I mean, on one level, it is hard to imagine a Republican primary contestant taking a huge number of their voters and either going independent or whatever it happens and sabotaging the Republican nominee, because that hasn't happened before. But Donald Trump is totally different, and it's very easy to imagine him, exactly what he'd say if she were to win the nomination.
You can argue back in the day,
it's
George
rigged,
Wallace did it.
It was stolen, and I'm doing it. Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's never happened, I guess. It's just, not in recent
And then there's
history.
the Dixiecrats with Strom Thurmond.
But, I mean, I don't know.
But on
All
the
of it
Republican
stands
side,
out as different.
that's not what happens because
no.
the genteel country club folks don't do it that way.
Yeah.
But I think that
it has
is not
happened.
your grandfather's Republican Party.
Yeah, and people have those fights, but it has been a long time, and of course, part of it is the old Reagan 11th commandment thing, that there was actually it's Republican doctrine not to do that.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
Reagan is no longer
right.
the
He's a
patron
liberal
saint
now.
of the Republican Party. Donald Trump is.
Right. So, probably people won't be listening to it. But it's very easy to imagine even the wording that he would be using, saying rigged, stolen, something, and he would give his supporters not only reason to walk, but reason to believe that they were morally justified in doing everything that they could to make sure that Haley didn't win.
Yeah, but again,
it's amazing.
Step back and look at what we're talking about here. People are worried about, well, what if Nikkki Haley were the nominee? I'm not worried about Nikkki Haley. If Nikkki Haley's the nominee, the Republican Party is suddenly a third smaller.
Yeah, and at war with itself. And I am afraid of being hit by stray bullets in the war that ensues, but that's about it. I mean, that's a pretty major problem, but
right. So that's why it's
not an electability
Trump was angry.
issue.
That's really what that tells us.
Okay. Yeah.
And then on a social media platform, he's every bit as agitated.
Sure.
He condemns Haley as delusional. This is all caps.
Oh, of course.
And then in a small case, could somebody please explain to Nikkki Haley she lost and lost really badly? And then in caps, Nikkki came in last, not second.
Well, no, but all right. Yeah. That's the way he feels about things, I'm sure.
Right. When, again, I told you the story, but back in college when the swimmers were in their two-person heats to see, who would advance, and I would ask my roommate, how you did? Well, pretty good. I came in second.
Okay.
that meant you lost.
Right.
Well, it's a two-person race.
That's true. But he's not a swimmer, that's for sure.
Right. Earlier today, Trump told reporters, I don't care if she stays in. And he clearly didn't mean a word of that.
That's nice. Yeah, I don't know. I guess somebody must have told him how bad he looked.
But let's not miss the forest for the trees. Steve Bannon writes, Donald Trump, of all people, is outraged that a candidate reacted to a defeat by presenting a second-place finish as a success.
Oh,
he
no,
thinks
not
it's
that.
Delusional for a losing candidate to stick around in the wake of an electoral rebuke. He's disgusted by the very idea of somebody doing a speech like they won after losing.
That's crazy.
Why, Trump effectively said, can't Haley simply accept defeat? Self-awareness is not among the former president's strong suits.
I guess not. She didn't organize any. I don't know what you would storm after this.
A boat parade.
I guess so.
In New Hampshire. In winter.
It's iced in and there's nothing can happen. Yeah, I don't know where you can't. You can't storm the state legislature because it's just the whole state.
Yeah.
So
exactly
that's
right.
not going to work. The Capitol's been done.
Yeah, I found a Garrett Hake's tweet, which is on my Pundit Roundup. I had misplaced that.
Okay.
I put it in the Pundit Roundup and then couldn't find it. Garrett Hake wrote, I don't know how or when or if the Trump campaign starts to grapple with this, but I keep meeting longtime New Hampshire GOP voters who backed him in 16 and 20 who say they can't vote for him again based on post-election behavior in 2020. He's surely going to need these folks if he's the nominee. And again, it's a reminder for all of you out there who perhaps thought to yourself, well, January 6th committee isn't really going to be the thing. Well, it is. And
we just didn't know what thing it was going to be. That's
post-election behavior in 20. Post-election behavior. That's January 6th. That's not the trials. The trials are another thing altogether. His court issues are on top of that.
Yes, although probably
it's
right in the
January
same
6th.
basket.
Well, one of them is about January 6th, but it's about January 6th.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't help him any. There's nobody out there.
Abortion.
Yeah, well, because they're sort of on the other side of that one, I suppose. But I imagine post-election behavior.
New Hampshire, like two-thirds said no. We don't like what happened.
That's true. It's not just New Hampshire either. Like we say that. Well, they're probably on the other side of it in Kansas, in wherever else that we've Ohio. Other states that I've already lost track that have said, oh, by the way, everything we thought about abortion turns out not to be true. They tried to put it on the
ballot in Missouri.
Yes.
Missouri's trying to do the Ohio thing and said, okay, well, we're going to change the rules. You can only have something as a referendum if 3 of the 4 people in this room right now talking with each other decide it's okay.
Yeah, well,
new rules.
It does stacks the odds. But yeah, that's true. You never know. Secretly, it may turn out that even most of the Republican Party is at least unwilling to ban abortion, and that's a step ahead. Interesting. And I guess I figure people who say things categorically or categorize things as post-election behavior, I guess it doesn't really matter ultimately, if they're saying they're not voting for him, whether it includes his indictments, non-January 6th related activity, it may very well include that. That's superfluous. All it really takes, I think the majority of them everyone will check the January 6th box who's in that category. And whether they also add Gene Carroll, I don't know. That's just a bonus.
Right. Now, what I saved for last here is a story that I don't know if you want to cover in detail or not, or whether you read it and it struck you or it didn't. But it's a fascinating, scary, incredible story that's in Politico by Michael Kruse, which a lot of people are talking about.
All right. Dramatic and scary. How's that? Is that a good setup for it?
That's a good setup.
That's longer than I thought. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
Our system needs to be broken, and he's the man to do it. Ted Johnson sincerely thought he wanted a uniter, not a divider, and that didn't last long. And Michael Kruse interviews this guy from New Hampshire.
The other guy from New Hampshire. There's another one still we haven't talked to.
Well, they're all in the legislature. This is just another one.
Yes. Hello, Senator
So this Ted Johnson, this is how the story starts. This Ted Johnson told me is what I hope. We were here the other day at a bar not too far from his house, and we were talking about Donald Trump and the possibility he could be the president. He breaks the system, he said. He exposes the deep state. It's going to be a miserable 4 years for everybody.
Okay.
For everybody,
what?
I said. Everybody. For you? Well, I think his policies are going to be good, but it's going to be hard to watch this happen because he's going to pull it apart, the country, that is.
Oh.
Well, now, the notion that somebody might wish for the country's dismantling would have sounded shocking coming from anybody. But it was especially jarring coming from this guy because I was at a Nikkki Haley town hall at the VFW in nearby Merrimack in the first week of September when Johnson stood up and asked her a question. He introduced himself as an independent voter and a retired soldier and felt like the nation was in a civil war and some of his neighbors would hate him if he so much as put up a sign for her in his yard. And on his mind, too, was his estrangement from his older brother because his older brother's never Trump. And he wanted to hear Haley's plan to pull us all back together.
Yeah.
And he thought about it. So his journey from that VFW last fall Haley voter to how he says he's set to vote this week for Trump because he wants Trump to pull the country apart offers as instructive an insight as I've yet encountered into how on earth we are where we are. Trump could be just a disgraced ex-president facing time in prison. Instead, at least for now, he's a durably dominant political force credibly eyeing a return to the White House. And if Trump wins in New Hampshire on Tuesday, which he did, and if he beats Joe Biden come November, which he won't, it'll be because of Johnson and the many thousands of others like him who looked for ways to quit Trump and ultimately couldn't, didn't, and haven't. And not remotely reluctantly, but with an explicit sense of vengeance. He's a wrecking ball, Johnson said. Everybody's going to say Trump is divisive, and he's going to split the country in half. We got this. That's what I want.
All right. Well, now you got his name and his photo, everybody. That seems dumb.
So, but, now listen to who he is. You think this is this hard scrabble guy who's like just trying to get by and he's pissed off because
economic
he lost his
anxiety,
job at the mill,
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
He's 58. He's married to his second wife. He has 3 young adult sons. He's a 22-year-old Army vet. And now as a senior project manager for an IT security company, he lives in a classic 3-bedroom house for $485,000. That's now worth roughly $250,000 more than that when he bought it.
I see.
He's originally from Illinois, a town, Centralia, Illinois, a town like too many towns in the more rural interior of the country that isn't what it was. His father's gallbladder several years broke back during a snowstorm and couldn't be airlifted, so they just had to watch him go.
Oh.
And by September, he was thinking, I just need somebody else. And he went to see Haley. And he got turned off by Haley because her answer was too long.
To what?
But he gave her a few small donations. And for Johnson, Trump had shifted from being the rebel to being a rebel without a cause. But Haley, she was a leader. But in retrospect, some of what he said during our couple of conversations then should have been a warning. You do your own reading and your own research, and you're what the hell's happened to this country, he said to me.
Oh, yeah. If once somebody says you do your own research,
no, this interview is over. They're gone. They're off.
Okay.
Where one of us goes, we all go, or whatever the saying is.
Sure, right.
He told me about one of his last conversations with his brother Fred, an anti-Trumper. He goes, well, what do you think about January 6th? And I said, well, I thought it was Patriots Day. And we talked about polling. Trump's going to win, man, he told me. I've been watching the news tonight. He's like 10 points ahead of Biden. He's not 10 points ahead of Biden.
This guy had the media going that he was an independent voter.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So I wasn't totally surprised by the text I got earlier this month. Going with Trump, Johnson told me. Haley's a flip-flop rhino. Our system needs to be broken, and he's the man to do it.
Yeah.
And so when I finally caught up with him, Michael Chris said, so what happened to you? And he said, you know what happened? I got pissed.
Yeah. What does that
Haley's
mean?
too scripted. I need somebody to bring a wrecking ball. It's a fascinating look at who some of these folks are.
Okay.
I find it fascinating. Are you going to convince them to not vote for Trump? No. They're totally committed because they need to be committed.
Right. But perhaps some disease or debilitation may convince him not to go out to vote by the time November rolls around because he sounds like a healthy individual.
Right. Well, that's, of course, another question. Why does Trump put on that
makeup?
Bronzing stuff so much? Is it because his face looks like his hands?
To be a wrecking ball.
Does he have the sores all over the place?
This country needs somebody who has the bold vision to paint their face a different color.
Right.
All right.
So,
what are these books that he's gotten? Photos of these books.
Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the part of the Constitution that prohibits people who tried to overthrow the government from running for office. He didn't do that, said Ted Johnson. There was no insurrection. He said, go over there peacefully and protest. So for a guy like me, I'm looking and I'm saying, why is everybody so hell-bent on getting Trump in jail? And what's your answer to that question? They're afraid as hell because this time around he's going to take the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, and they're going to upset the apple cart.
Oh.
I refer to the argument Trump is now making over and over. He's going to go after them because he says they're going after him. Well, that's the way I feel. Do you feel like that before he said it, or did you feel like that? And you said yes. Well, he said that, and I said yes. And trust me, he said, the guy's a pig. He's a womanizer. He's arrogant a-hole.
Yeah.
But I need somebody that's going to go in and be a wrecking ball.
I see. Well,
and
are
that's
there any non-arrogant a-hole wrecking balls?
I get it. I understand everything you said about Trump. It's true. I'm voting for him anyway.
Okay. And getting if they still made New Hampshire phone books, I would say lots of people now know where that guy lives if it ever comes down to it. So we'll make sure that he doesn't participate in any of the wrecking.
Fascinating stuff, but he's not enough to win with. He loses.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We had a longer than usual off-air conversation, but we only have that 1 minute to wrap things up, and man, there was a lot more to say. How about that Ted Johnson fellow? I don't recommend showing up at his house, but, it makes you wanna, I guess. And, of course, he encourages that because he loves chaos and wrecking balls and all of that sort of thing. And, you definitely want to give him what he's looking for in American politics. I'm sure, right? I don't know. Well, anyway, I mentioned earlier during the show, and I was wondering whether this might be the last thing that Greg wanted to throw in there, although I would have been surprised by that, but not entirely because, of course, he is a doctor, and I thought he might find it interesting. Much discussion this morning, and I mean late breaking this morning, just before the show. Ars Technica out with a bit of a yikes story, as they put it here, just this morning, just before 8 o'clock this morning. So a lot of social media chatter about it, and a lot of commentary, just quick commentary on it on social media being, this explains a lot, I think, and may even explain part of Trump's drive to get back to the White House. Yes, sure, he wants to pardon himself for all of the crimes he's committed. That's absolutely top of mind. But I wonder whether one of these other fringe benefits might not be of interest to him too. Ars Technica's story, the White House has its own pharmacy. And boy, was it shady under Trump. It doesn't surprise me terribly, of course, that it has the White House has lots of medical facilities because, it's ostensibly the most important person in the world lives there and runs the the country and the world from out of there. And that person's health is ordinarily paramount and very important. This despite the fact that it would have been probably a better medical decision and a better trolley problem decision, say, around late September, early November 2020, to let a curable, although then still mysterious and difficult to manage disease, take its natural course and take the president of the United States along with it. But they didn't do that. But we knew about the medical facilities there and the medical facilities available, of course, to the president. Between that and Walter Reed, back in the day when doctors had magazines, Walter Reed Army Medical Center and the Bethesda Naval Hospital, but now they're all sort of joint services hospitals. But at any rate, we know that there are some, bleeding edge medical facilities available. Of course, anything you can get under the sun available to the president of the United States. But we also know that they had what was the name of the monoclonal treatments that they had on hand in the White House early on, such that by late September of 2020 there was it remdesivir? I'm trying to remember if I remember the names of these various treatments correctly or not, but such that when he contracted COVID, they were able to pump him full of experimental doses of this drug and others, and then ship him off to Walter Reed and pump him full of various other things in order to keep him. He was really hard hit by COVID, but they managed to bring him back, unfortunately, from the brink of death from COVID. It's not just a matter of political preferences spilling over to, I wish death on this person. I think that his survival enabled a continuation of the kind of crazy-ass COVID denialism that needlessly killed thousands of Americans and other people around the world, kept the disease viable and mutating such that we were never really able to stay ahead of it, and incredible damage done by his freelancing medical, quote-unquote, medical advice to people who were politically motivated to take it despite it all. That's my explanation for why I think it might have been better, trolley problem-wise, to let nature take its course. I think all the people who believed in him and continued to treat COVID as a joke, as he advised them to do, and as his followers advised one another to do, who knows what their reaction would have been. It's not beyond them to then have said, oh, well, had COVID taken out their leader right in front of everybody, and I'm giving terrible advice, and I'm following that advice myself, and you should too, even though that was a lie, because he got vaccinated as soon as he could. Although at the time it wasn't a lie, because he was at the time saying this is a great thing. I invented it. That part was a lie. But, he didn't even actually go that far. It certainly could have. It's not beyond him to do. Anyway, the point is that that he could have been taken out by the disease despite all of his carelessness, his refusal to accommodate masking, all sorts of things, plus of all his stupid speculations about hydroxychloroquine and bleach and light and God knows what else, the way he treated things. If people had seen the idiot that denied all the science and insisted on going his own way every time on everything get struck down dead by COVID right in front of everybody, there could have been, at least for a major part of the population that was following him, a moment of reckoning where they might have said, oh, maybe that wasn't the guy to be listening to. On the other hand, they absolutely could have said he was murdered by the deep state and, believe what they want to believe. So I don't know. It wasn't for sure, but it was worth risking. I would say that. Anyway, the point is he's got lots of medical attention available to him. That's always been clear. in the investigative reporting that came out of that episode, there was a lot of discussion about, like I said, remdesivir and other experimental treatments that were being stocked in the White House. It was briefly a scandal, but the general condition of the Trump presidency was that there was no way to keep track of all the things that would have developed into major scandals for any other presidency, because the zone was constantly being flooded with corruption and scandal, such that you couldn't keep track. But briefly, there was a moment when they basically got down to the story of Trump and his operatives, and up to and I guess and including Jared Kushner, who was supposedly in charge. Well, he was always supposedly in charge of everything. They were basically hoarding these monoclonal treatments and stocking the White House with enough to make sure there's enough for Ivanka if she gets it, right? And there was, meanwhile promising days later to distribute it with a general mobilization of the military to deliver it for free to all the vulnerable seniors. I love the senior peoples in these countries. And of course, having hoarded it the whole time instead. So that should have been a major scandal. Anyway, underlying all of this, yes, medical facilities available to the President of the United States. We've also covered extensively on the show. It's been a while, but the medical treatments and facilities available to members of Congress through the Office of the Attending Physician, which I think they renamed at some point. But that too, basically a more or less free, all you can eat medical facility available to diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, regular checkups, all sorts of treatment available for nearly free to all members of Congress. Ostensibly, this is a place where they will treat you if you are wandering through the Capitol, taking a tour of our great nation's Capitol, or smearing feces on the wall, whatever it might be, and are suddenly struck ill and need immediate medical treatment. Normally, they'll ship you out the front door and put you in an ambulance and take you somewhere else, but if need be, they will treat you at the Office of the Attending Physician. It's mostly for members, occasionally high-ranking staff. If they're basically saying, I need you to be here to help me with this thing that I'm working on, and you can't spare the time to go to the hospital, get treatment here. So, similar situation at the White House, and they have their own pharmacy, and Donald Trump is basically pretty severely addicted to probably pharmaceutical-grade drugs. I think everybody kind of has known about that for a while. And guess what? It was wildly abused during the Trump years. And guess what? They had a lunatic as the White House doctor at the time who had his own substance abuse problems. And guess what? Not only was it handing out pharmaceuticals like candy, they were probably using candy as pharmaceuticals as well. So just so you know, it also, of course, wasted a tremendous amount of money. That's the subheader on this piece. Once again, Beth, I don't know, Mole, M-O-L, maybe Mole, I don't know whether it's an ethnic name or not, but Beth, I can handle that one. Beth Mole, maybe. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but there's no way for anybody to tell. Again, Ars Technica. The White House has its own pharmacy, and boy, was it shady under Trump. Subheader says it wasted $750,000 during the Trump years and freely handed out Ambien and I don't know what this is, Provigil. I haven't run into that one. But, well, I haven't run into Ambien yet either, but I know what it is, or I have some idea of what it is. All right. The White House, it tells us, has its own pharmacy that until recently could perhaps be best described as a hot mess, according to a recent investigation report. That would be an investigative report, really, from the Department of Defense's Office of the Inspector General. Why? Because the DOD runs this thing for some reason, and I guess that's because it's military medical officers staffing it because USA President America. For years, the White House Medical Unit, run by the White House Military Office, provided the full scope of pharmaceutical services to senior officials and staff. It stored, inventoried, prescribed, dispensed, and sometimes didn't bother prescribing, but still dispensed, and disposed of prescription medications, including opioids and sleep medications. However, it was not staffed by a licensed pharmacist or pharmacy support staff, nor was it credentialed by any outside agency. It's just, I'm in the Army and here's a bunch of drugs. That's what they had. The operations of this pseudo-pharmacy, which would get you arrested anywhere else in the world, of course. Well, maybe not in the world, but certainly in the United States. Unless you were a Christian saying, I don't want to get licensed because it's against my religion. Then it would be okay, obviously. But the operations of the pseudo-pharmacy went as well as one might expect, according to the DOD's OIG, Office of the Inspector General's, alarming investigation report. Why do they keep saying investigation report? The investigation was prompted by complaints in May of 2018, alleging that an unnamed senior military medical officer was engaged in improper medical practices. Was Ronnie Jackson the White House doctor still then, or was he gone? I don't know. This resulted in the OIG's investigation. I know, you said that. It was prompted by all right, whatever, which included 70 interviews of military office officials, great, who worked in the White House between 2009 and 2018 and covers the office's activity until early 2020. What happened then? However, the investigation heavily focused on prescription drug records and care between, let's say 2017 and 2019, during the Trump administration. During that time, staff at the White House pharmacy kept handwritten records of prescriptions, sometimes, probably not, and the OIG found the records frequently contained errors in medication counts. Oopsie, I said 4 and I gave you 400. No. Illegible text, that's going to happen with doctors. Not that there were any doctors working. Crossed out text, and lacked medical provider and mandatory patient information. Some random person just got all this Ambien. The pharmacy let White House staff pick up over-the-counter drugs from open bins in violation of Navy medical regulations. It didn't dispose of controlled substances properly, increasing the risk of diversion. I guess that's the euphemism for Stephen Miller would come in here and scoop up all of the leftover painkillers that he could get and crush them up and snort them. Maybe, allegedly. No one really knows. Staff provided prescriptions without verifying patients' identities and provided prescriptions to people who were ineligible for care. And it dispensed pricey brand name products freely rather than generic equivalents that are considerably cheaper. Also a violation of regulations. Don't give me the cheap stuff. I want the name brand. It's very important to me that people see the prestigious name on the pills that I crush up and smear on my face along with my makeup to absorb it through my skin. Okay. In one interview, a White House pharmacy staff member said an unnamed doctor asked, quote, if I could hook up this person with some Provigil, as a parting gift for leaving the White House. Wow. That's, I was going to then look up what is this thing, but that's actually the next paragraph. Provigil, I'm going to guess it's a G sound. Provigil is a drug that treats excessive tiredness. I guess I can figure out what that's about. Would you say you're excessively tired? I feel like it might be, or I don't know who this is going to. Bannon, Miller, any number of wackadoodles that, the body man that got kicked out for gambling. Who knows? Somebody's making an exit from the White House and they want Provigil. It treats excessive tiredness and is typically used for patients with narcolepsy, sleep apnea, and other sleep disorders. Or who just like snorting things, I guess. Brand name Provigil is 55 times more expensive than the generic equivalent. So, by the way, if you're looking to if you are ever looking to the Trump White House for relief from prescription drug prices, here's one reason you'll never get it. They have no idea how much things cost because they get all their drugs for free. Anyway, between 2017 and 2019, the White House pharmacy spent an estimated $98,000 for Provigil, which was by the way, for what reason? Did the president have narcolepsy? No, it was just part of the goodie bags for people who worked at the White House. The parting gifts. What do they call those things? The gifting suite at the Oscars. You get to go through the pharmacy on your way out the door and take any pharmaceuticals, brand name pharmaceuticals you want for free. How about that? Can I hook up this person with some prescription uppers as a parting gift for leaving the White House? How about no, F you, leave the White House. Get the hell out of here. No free drugs, no parting gifts, goodie bags with it. Oh my God. Anyway, right. So 98 grand on Provigil. At the same time, it also spent an estimated $46,500 for Ambien, a prescription sedative, which is 174 times more expensive than the generic equivalent. Even further, the White House Medical Unit spent an additional $100,000 above generic drug costs by having Walter Reed National Military Medical Center fill brand name prescriptions. So I don't know what the hell that's about even. If you got all of these drugs, I guess if there's some drugs you're missing, you get them from Walter Reed and, hey, build the military because who cares about their budget? I.e., I mean, another way of looking at this, if it was being spun, if it was happening in the Biden administration and what's his name? Jim Jordan was investigating it, he'd be talking about how that he was stealing drugs from military personnel, which I guess is happening here in this, but never mind because I don't know. USA America. Now I guess the more shocking stuff. White House baggies comes up next. One other White House pharmacy staff member gave clues as to what the staff was doing with those brand name prescriptions. The staffer told OIG investigators that ahead of overseas trips, the staff would prepare packets of controlled medications to be handed out to the White House staff. Everybody take drugs. Everybody take drugs. We're on drugs. We're gonna use the death penalty against these drug kingpins who hand out drugs to our children. Look out for rainbow fentanyl and all of the Halloween candies. Also, kids are using litter boxes. Something. Eat bleach. But they would hand them out to White House staffers on overseas trips, making sure that we were conducting our foreign policy on drugs. Although, I will say, I have heard things like this before. The idea being, I mean, you're making an overseas trip, they're flying at wackadoodle hours halfway around the world, sometimes on Air Force One, they have, and I guess the legitimate side of this is people saying, I gotta get some sleep or I'm going to be completely out of it when we get to these important negotiations in Japan, China, wherever, the other side of the world, Europe. So, that's the way people were using them. But, on the other hand, on the Trump side of things, like, do you believe the excuse? Well, I got to be in my right mind when I get there to conduct these negotiations. No, you don't. You are never you had no intention of conducting these negotiations in your right mind. What are you talking about? All right. Well, the point is, I want to sleep, or I want to stay up all the time, or I love cocaine and or opiates, and just give them to me. Okay. So, wow. So they used to just spend their time preparing packets of controlled medications to be handed out to White House staff. And those would typically be Ambien or Provigil, and typically both, right? So I guess you get on the plane. I want to go to sleep. Give me the Ambien. Sleep, and then, wake up. Yeah, I can't. I've been taking an Ambien. I got us. I'm exhausted. Well, you're here in North Korea. It's time to meet with the wackadoodle that wrote us the letter. All right. Give me some Provigil because I'm a narcoleptic. Okay. And up, and then, gee whiz, I can't understand why this orange idiot is saluting North Korean military personnel because he's disoriented. Why is that happening? One wonders. Anyway, so we would normally make these packages of Ambien and Provigil, and a lot of times they'd be in 5 tablets in a Ziploc bag. So traditionally, what a tradition, we would hand these out. But a lot of times the senior staff would come by, or their staff representatives sending their assistant, go get me some drugs, just like Rush Limbaugh, and it killed him. So Now, the staff or staff representatives would come by to the resident's clinic to pick it up. And it was very much a, hey, I'm here to pick this up for Ms. X. That sounds, I don't know. Ms. X makes me think Kellyanne Conway for some reason. And the expectation was we just go ahead and pass it out so that they could just go ahead and pass out. In addition to the excessive costs of Ambien and Provigil, and by the way, I should be checking my incoming social media to see if I'm mispronouncing Provigil, but let's find out. Let's see. All right, no word yet so far, so we'll just continue on calling it Provigil and see what happens. And then if I'm right, they'll send me free samples of it, and I can give it to Trump staffers. Excellent. So, in addition to the excessive costs of Ambien and Provigil, the White House Medical Office may have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on health care for ineligible staff members. If you thought, well, you know, they're taking care of the President of the United States and his top aides. What if they were just taking care of everybody? Or friends of friends? Can you hook me up? I know a guy who works for a guy in the White House. The White House Medical Unit senior officials estimated that its executive medicine clinic has 60 enrolled patients, but it provides, and that's a lot. So the president, his family, top aides, their family, some other less top aides, and then who else? I don't know. 60 normally, Secret Service maybe, but it provided care for 6,000 employees, potentially billing the DOD. Between 2017 and 2019, officials also offered senior government officials a patient category code for care at Walter Reed, such that the facility was unable to properly bill them. That's interesting. So you get a patient code that basically means that the billing doesn't go through and everything you get is for free, and they just in the end have to say, I don't know, I guess it just comes out of the Pentagon budget. Sorry. In the 3 years that they did this, I guess, Walter Reed waived over $496,000 in outpatient fees because of these patient categories. That's pretty amazing. Look, all we have to do is find the waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh, it's happening right here by the guy who says we got to find waste, fraud, and abuse. What do you know? Once again, every Republican accusation is a confession. Here's your welfare queens. They're the President of the United States, his family, and his closest associates. Overall, the OIG concluded that all phases of the White House Medical Unit's pharmacy operations had severe and systemic problems due to the unit's reliance on ineffective internal controls to ensure compliance with pharmacy safety standards. But did they care? No, they didn't, because they were taking Ambien. The report does not mention Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, who served as the physician to the president from 2013 to 2018 under both Barack Obama and Donald Trump. STAT, I guess that's the medical news site STAT, which first reported on the OIG's new report, noted that Jackson had been accused of fostering a toxic work environment, engaging in alcohol-fueled misconduct. Why bother with alcohol when you could just do it with Ambien? And misusing Ambien. Ambien specifically. So if you were wondering why the weird surplus of handed out for free Ambien ended up in the White House pharmacy, the answer is Ronnie Jackson was helping himself the whole time, or really hurting himself, and the tradition continued. But interestingly, he doesn't get mentioned in the report. OIG received those allegations during the first part of 2018, around the same time when the pharmacy complaints came in, and some of the allegations against Jackson were confirmed by a separate OIG investigation released in 2021. Though a draft of the new report on the White House pharmacy was completed in 2020, we had it that earlier, it sat under review in the White House military office until July of 2023, which I guess is the Biden administration, and you wonder why it might have taken so long. The OIG laid out a series of recommendations for establishing oversight of the White House pharmacy, like have a real pharmacy would be one, create policy to determine staff eligibility and pharmaceutical oversight. DOD officials have agreed to the recommendations and are working to implement them, the OIG report noted. What Well, the Republican solution would probably actually work here. Privatize it, right? Now the White House pharmacy is a CVS, and they have to comply with all the rules. That problem solved, except for the problem of not being able to get White House staff Ambien and Provigil, and not knowing how to pronounce Provigil. All right, that's a hell of a story. It certainly does sound super shady under the Trump administration. I hope it's been cleaned up under the Biden administration. I guess there's reason to believe it might have been, because he's generally much, much gooder than the Trump bad orange guy. But that's all. That's all I've got to go on. The guess. But I don't know. I'll pretend to be shocked at the drug abuse by the Donald Trump administration, by which I mean the Donald Trump, and I don't know, add it to the pile of scandals. So maybe that's the biggest thing going for him. I got to get elected president. Yes, I got to do something about pardoning myself, but also the free drugs really bothering me, that I have to pay for these things, even though basically I'm not paying for anything. I order it from the pharmacy and then I stiff them. Ooh, that's a solution. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's try to cram in a few other items for your consideration today. There's some other bad news from around the world and around the country, some of which is encapsulated here on, I have good news and I have bad news about this one story. On the good news side, we found yesterday, though we didn't get to mention it, the Supreme Court apparently finding in favor of the federal government as against the Texas state government on the question of, these extreme measures that Greg Abbott is taking to, ostensibly to try to control immigration, which is, of course, outside of his purview. I know it's troublesome in Texas, but immigration is a federal issue, not a state issue. It just is. But you couldn't convince the Supreme Court of that necessarily, right? So they had to try, and they had a contest over whether or not, in fact, the federal government is in charge of the border and what goes on it and what sorts of impediments you might put along the border, whether for the purpose of discouraging immigration or anything else. The border is a federal border, not a state border. Get lost. Really should have been the end of the question. But as you know, Greg Abbott been putting the floats in the river and the razor blades between the floats and the concertina wire on the shorelines or in the water, or God knows where they're keeping the stuff. Anyway, they took him to court, and not surprisingly, in the end, if you are still into this idea of there's a rule of law in this country and the precedents are what they are, and you try to let them stay in place at all costs, unless somehow justice and equity, not equity, because that's DEI, demand that there be some different ruling overturning precedent from before. But basically, it should never have been a contest as to whether or not the federal border is under the control of federal authorities or state authorities. It's not state authorities. That's the end of it. So there was a contest over whether or not the federal government ought to be able to push aside state officials and access the border and maintain the physical condition of the border, and in this case, remove the concertina wire so that it could conduct the immigration business that it's entitled to conduct under the Constitution. And they did find that was the case, but amazingly, in its own right, it was a 5-4 decision. So the straight up question of who controls the federal border, the federal government or some other government. It really should have been easy, but instead it was a close shave. No pun intended, since we're talking about razor wire. But there you go. The Supreme Court said, Texas, you lose. United States government, you win. What has Texas said? Well, by some interpretations, Texas has said, go screw yourself. We're going to do it anyway. I saw some reporting, well, I don't know, some discussion, certainly, over at, for instance, at Daily Kos among the community members that said that Texas had outright declared that it was going to ignore the Supreme Court and reinstall the razor wire there and just say the Supreme Court can come and remove it by itself if it wants to do something like that. I think a little closer to the truth is, though Texas is defiant, I don't believe that the razor wire, certainly not in all cases, has been removed. And it's a question of, well, the Supreme Court has had its say, and it's only been a couple of minutes, but the razor wire is still there. Well, of course it's still there. So I guess there's some question as between whether it's in some places been removed and that Texas has replaced it and said, screw you, Supreme Court, or is it that the Supreme Court has ordered or has given the federal government the right to remove it, but, it's only been a couple of hours and they haven't gotten around to removing it yet, so it's still there. CNN's reporting of the situation as of updated as of this morning is this much. This is not over, Texas says, after Supreme Court lets Biden administration remove razor wire at U.S.-Mexico border. Rosa Flores, Sarah Weisfeld, Josh Campbell, and Alicia Ebrahimi is my best guess at the pronunciation here. Ebrahimi is not that difficult, but there's a J in it somewhere that I wasn't expecting. Anyway, it's surprising enough, even if it isn't quite as flashy as simply defying the Supreme Court and reinstalling concertina wire. But this is not over. It's an interesting thing to say, given that usually when the Supreme Court says this is over, it has to be considered over because, of course, there's no appeal from that. But there is defiance, I guess, and what do you do with that? And the answer normally is, well, I don't know. When we were growing up, I guess we all thought, well, federal authority will be asserted. You can't simply ignore it. And Texas is going to be no match for, presumably, the United States military. But now there's no telling because, again, it used to be illegal to smash the windows in on a locked Capitol, smear your feces on the wall, and take over the floor of the Senate. But, things change. So what do we got to say? Let's find out what CNN was reporting and what's updated. As the migrant crisis continues on the U.S.-Mexico border and beyond, tensions between Texas and federal officials remain high. Here are the latest developments. Razor wire is still up along a contested section of the U.S.-Mexico border a day after the U.S. Supreme Court voted to let federal border patrol agents remove the barrier installed there as part of Texas Republican governor's security initiative, while the state's legal challenge to the wire cutting plays out. A CNN team in Eagle Pass, Texas, recently the epicenter of the migrant crisis near where 3 migrants drowned this month, spotted the razor wire Tuesday morning. The High Court ruled 5-4 on Monday in a victory for President Joe Biden. I mean, I guess so, but really a victory for the federal government in the ongoing dispute with Texas over whether Border Patrol has the legal authority to cut concertina wire installed by Texas on the banks of the Rio Grande. The day after the ruling, the Department of Homeland Security demanded Texas give it full access to the border by January 26th. That's not until Friday, according to a letter obtained by CNN. Texas has said Eagle Pass's Shelby Park area this is rather remarkable, open to the public. All you have to do is climb over concertina wire to get there. But the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Service, I guess, Bureau, what do we call that, has been blocked from accessing it, according to the letter. The head of U.S. Customs and Border Protection told CNN Tuesday the Supreme Court ruling allows us to have access to the border so we can begin to gain access like we did before, noting the rest of the case is still under active litigation. So I guess it's not over. I guess they have a point there. And it's not mere defiance necessarily. There is currently no timetable on removing the wire. Acting CBP Commissioner Troy Miller said, now federal customs and border protection agents stand ready to swiftly, I guess not that swiftly, cut through the fencing in response to any life-saving or critical operational matters, a law enforcement source told CNN. So it may be that they leave the wire in place until they see someone drowning and then decide they will enforce their federal authority to cut it next time. They would promptly breach the fencing to render aid to any individual in distress or if otherwise deemed operationally necessary, the source added. Asked if CBP reserves the right to cut through the razor wire along the border despite the ongoing dispute, the source said, this goes far beyond reserving the right. The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered it. I don't know whether that's really the case, but they have ordered that they have found, let us know that they find it within the purview of CBP's rights and responsibilities at the very least. Texas sued last year to stop the wire cutting, saying it illegally destroys state property. That's unique. And undermines security in order to assist migrants in crossing the border. A federal appeals court in December ordered Border Patrol agents to stop the practice while court proceedings play out, and the Justice Department this month filed an emergency application asking the Supreme Court to overturn that decision. Texas Governor Greg Abbott and his Department of Public Safety doubled down Monday on their use of state-erected barriers. This is not over, Abbott wrote Monday on Twitter. Texas's razor wire is an effective deterrent to the illegal crossings Biden encourages. All of that is kind of upside down and backwards and false. I will continue to defend Texas's constitutional authority, which you don't have, to secure the border and prevent the Biden administration from destroying our property, the illegal stuff that we put on their property. You know, that's how it goes in the mind of Texas Republicans. Texas will maintain its current posture in deterring illegal border crossings by utilizing effective border security measures, even though they're not effective. Department of Public Safety spokesperson Lieutenant Chris Olivares wrote Monday on the platform, claiming Texas is the only state using every strategy and resource to protect its sovereignty, not everyone, combat criminal activity, and discourage illegal immigration. Texas authorities last week arrested migrants at Shelby Park and charged them with criminal trespassing, even though it's open to the public, marking the first arrests of migrants since the state took control of the area at the U.S.-Mexico border this month, an official said. A new state law deems entering the state illegally a crime, which, you know, they may not really be entitled to do. The Texas Military Department issued a statement Tuesday saying it continues to hold the line in Shelby Park to deter and prevent unlawful entry into the state of Texas. We remain all right, this is all garbage from here on in, I guess. Previously, the Biden administration informed state officials that they had until the end of the day on January 17th to stop blocking the Border Patrol's access to a 2.5-mile stretch along the U.S.-Mexico border that includes Eagle Pass, or the U.S. Justice Department would get involved. And they did, and they won, according to a letter from the Department of Homeland Security obtained exclusively by CNN, but probably could have been had by just about anybody. But look, they did the legwork. Okay, so we have that. It might not be all as alarming as I've seen it expressed in some places, with open defiance of the Supreme Court with physical barriers. It's not entirely clear how things are playing out, but it is clear that the Texans are frustrated and want to put on a show of defiance. Whether or not they actually will, when push comes to shove, remains to be seen. Okay, a couple of other things to add to the pile here. Add this to what the F is wrong with Oklahoma file. We spent a little time yesterday talking about the wackadoodle legislation being proposed by the worst of the worst, presumably, in the Oklahoma State Legislature, including legislation addressing the fake problem of furries in our elementary schools. There was, what else was in there? Oh, there was a whole collection of madness that had been introduced. The cockfighting legalization was among them. What else was in the archives yesterday? Oh, yes, right. The bill labeling Hispanic people terrorists. That was a great addition. Well, I regret to inform you that it may be an environmental problem in Oklahoma. So here's the latest lunatic outrage. HuffPost has this one. Natalie Baptiste does the reporting. Top GOP, that's rhymes, even though you're supposed to say GOP. Top GOP, this is, I feel like the New York Post would run with this. Top GOP school official appoints woman behind libs of TikTok to key position. This is the Oklahoma version of Chris Rufo, essentially, right? Chris Rufo went first in the draft to Florida to be the I don't know what, the head of the new school and the education department or whatever down in Florida. So he's off the board. Next up in the draft is Oklahoma, and they decide, what are we going to do for our schools? Chris Rufo's off the board. John Eastman is in legal trouble, and it was never really about education here. We'll take libs of TikTok next and install her directly in government here. Chaya Raichik is primarily known for her popular Twitter account, where she often smears LGBTQ plus educators, one of her favorite pastimes, in fact. And now she's going to be in government. Ryan Walters, the top school official in Oklahoma, has appointed, and there's no oversight about this. Maybe it falls to the state Senate, which is full of people who are looking to legalize cockfighting and outlaw litter boxes. So, maybe it's just a foregone conclusion that she'll be confirmed. But Ryan Walters is the name of the jackass who thought this was a good idea. Has appointed an inflammatory right-wing activist known for targeting LGBTQ plus teachers to the Library Media Advisory Committee at the State Department of Education. Chaya Raichik runs Libs of TikTok, a popular account on Twitter where she posts videos about LGBTQ plus educators, often smearing them as groomers or indoctrinators. Walters claimed that Raichik, who lives in California, is a valuable asset to Oklahoma schools. Sure, why show up for work? We're just going to pay you. This is the ultimate in wingnut welfare, essentially. And if you ever had any doubt about why these sorts of lunatic right-wing online influencers do what they do and waste their time the way they waste it gathering this information and attacking people, the answer is if you do it enough and in great enough volume to get noticed, they will just hand you money and power. And if that were the case on our side, well, I guess I'd be president of the United States by now. Certainly something would have happened. But I just think about all the time that we spent struggling to get any sort of support or funding whatsoever, say, for filibuster reform, and finding almost no success with that. You couldn't get anybody to support that for the longest time. And then eventually there was some support. But when I say, close to minimal support, it was a valiant effort. And I absolutely credit Darcy Berner for having engineered it in all of this time. But all I can tell you is it was a struggle to get even the slowest trickle of funding in for what I thought was an extremely important effort. But nonetheless, I guess interested almost no one until it was almost done, at which point everybody else claimed credit for it. But in the meantime, here you go. You can be libs of TikTok and do this and get paid for it eventually and be handed the keys to an education department in another state where you don't even live. Back to the article. Chaya is on the front lines. No, she isn't. She is, tweeting from her basement. On the front line, showing the world exactly what the radical left is all about. Lowering standards, porn in schools, no, and pushing woke indoctrination on our kids. Walters, the state superintendent of schools, which is a problem in itself, said in a press release on Tuesday. Because of her work, families across the country know just what is going on in schools around the country. And they're walking, I don't know whether she's telling them this, but they're walking around thinking that there are litter boxes in schools, and there aren't. So you tell me how it's going. Not to mention the fact that the idea of, well, we're gonna make our schools safe, or we want to make our schools safe. So our solution for safety for the kids in our schools is let's bring in the world's leading cause of school bomb threats and install her here so that she can start targeting Oklahoma schools with the bomb threats. And our kids will immediately be evacuated because she's tweeting now on your taxpayer dollar in Oklahoma. We're sending it out of state to California to someone who will endanger your children from 1,000 miles away. Fantastic. What a great idea. Well, I'll continue on with the reading here. The war on books is a part of the right's larger fight against public schools. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a step here, a little paragraph about him praising her. Her unique perspective is invaluable as part of my plan, Walters says, to make Oklahoma schools safer for kids and friendly to parents, minus the bomb threats. Chaya has a much-needed and powerful voice, as well as a tremendous platform that will benefit Oklahoma students and their families with bomb threats. The war on books, of course, part of the right's larger fight against public schools and its efforts to keep libraries from providing books to children and students that feature LGBTQ plus themes and progressive concepts. In an attempt to remove these books from schools, conservatives have likened them to pornography. Now, they have just said that they are pornography, and other topics unsuitable for children. Both Rachik and Walters are well versed in the conservative culture wars. Rachik began posting videos in 2021. This is how long she's had to cultivate this career in order to turn it into something that's lucrative and powerful, where she criticized educators and claimed they were indoctrinating children. And Walters has been smearing Oklahoma teachers and making false claims about sexually explicit materials in schools since his days as Republican Governor Kevin Stitt's Secretary of Education. Rachik does not appear to have any experience in schools or government, but her platform has already led to bomb threats in Oklahoma schools. Did you think I was kidding? Oh, that's funny. Why would you imagine that? In August, Rachik posted a video to Twitter of a librarian at the Union School District in suburban Tulsa making light of the conservative moral panic that teachers are pushing a woke agenda. Walters retweeting the video, saying, "Woke ideology is real and I am here to stop it." According to NBC, the school began receiving bomb threats the same day. Womp womp. Who could have predicted it? Rachik's videos have affected teachers and educators across the country. In August, a majority white California elementary school was evacuated due to bomb threats after Rachik criticized a playdate event for students of color there. Good reason to bomb them, don't you think? In November, a public school district in Iowa received a deluge of threats and upped its security, at unknown cost, I would guess, after Rachik reposted a video of a teacher joking about, quote, forcing students to be gay, which of course wasn't happening. The state's largest teachers organization spoke out against the appointment. Oklahoma has thousands of qualified active and retired library media specialists, in addition to education experts capable of evaluating Oklahoma standards. However, instead of elevating Oklahoma educators, an out-of-state political actor with no experience is appointed to OSDE's Library Media Advisory Committee, the Oklahoma Education Association told HuffPost in a statement. This appointee posted a doctored video which provoked attacks on a Tulsa Union educator, which led to bomb threats that shut down an Oklahoma school district for days. This is part of a disturbing trend of allowing disreputable and inflammatory outside voices to have influence over Oklahoma public education. Oklahoma's educators deserve to have their voices heard and represented by those in Oklahoma communities. So how do you like that? Pretty good. And, yeah, I like the fact that it brings the worst of international news home to rest. Why? What do I mean about that? Just as we're watching the Israel-Hamas war play out in Gaza and realizing, oh my God, the Israeli government, some of you think that it's been crazy since forever, or since its founding, I guess some of you would say. But not in my opinion, but certainly an opinion shared by many that of late, the Israeli government has really gone over the edge by inviting its basically most bloodthirsty and literally murderous right-wing lunatics and moving them directly into government. Wow, I can't believe that the Israelis are doing that. It's a good thing that isn't happening here, like inviting bloodthirsty terrorists into government in, let's say Oklahoma. Well, higher chick's reputation precedes her, and before she even takes up the position, there's already bomb threats being phoned into schools all over Oklahoma. Thanks a bunch. Really love to see it. Way to keep the kids safe. All right. Well, that's a weird one, no doubt. All right. Let's see. Let me add another thing since we're on right-wing lunatic violence and insurrectionism as a topic. Here's something I wasn't expecting. It comes in of late on the January 6th front, thanks to the reporting of Meena Venkataramanan. Venkataramanan. I have no idea where the pronunciation or the emphasis is supposed to be. I apologize, Meena. Meena seems easy enough to pronounce, though. She writes, why January 6th insurrectionists sent a letter to the Folger Shakespeare Library. That's the library where they secretly replace your Shakespeare content with rich, aromatic, mountain-grown Folgers crystals, I presume. This is of interest. I really want to give some more time to trying to figure out pronunciation of the last name. Maybe by tomorrow I'll get it right and I can do an apology thing. But hard to do on the fly and on the radio. So why did insurrectionists send a letter to the Folger Shakespeare Library? On January 6th, and long before it, that's the important part, Shakespeare was co-opted by white nationalists. This is really kind of interesting. I don't know that I actually agree with this analysis as to the reasoning, but I guess it's established by some reference to some evidence, so it might be something else to watch. More important to me here is the fact that well prior to January 6th, people are writing to the Folger Shakespeare Library, which is located at 201 East Capitol Street, Southeast, which puts it in the perimeter of the Capitol Hill complex. It's on, I guess they note in the article here, it shares a block with some, is it Senate office buildings? And the idea here is the insurrectionists in late December have already planned that on January 6th, they're going to try to establish some sort of perimeter around the entire Capitol complex, knowing as they do about the underground tunnels that connect some of the buildings. So it wasn't enough for them to surround the Capitol because members of Congress could, quote unquote, escape from their blockade by taking underground tunnels to the House and Senate office buildings, to the Library of Congress, to a few other buildings scattered around the area. They were going to establish a perimeter around all of them and prevent escapes because they were so peaceful, you see. And the Folger Library, due to its location, was going to fall inside that perimeter. So they actually send a letter here. While insurrectionists were plotting to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, they took time to write and send a letter to an institution 2 blocks from their target, the Folger Shakespeare Library, the world's largest collection of material related to the English playwright. Quote, we will be blocking access to your building, ellipsis, to prevent our persons of grievance, that's not a thing, but they mean members of Congress, from using you as a loophole, read the insurrectionists' letter, which circulated on a pro-Trump message board called The Donald. That would be, I guess, the Reddit subreddit, right? The Donald, before the insurrection, and was published this month in the Folger's online archive. The letter explained that the insurrectionists would create a 2.4-mile blockade, quote, surrounding all buildings to which the U.S. Capitol has underground tunnels too, unquote, including the John Adams building of the Library of Congress, with which the Folger shares a block, presumably to prevent those inside the Capitol from escaping through the buildings. This is nothing personal to the library itself, the letter continued. We have no intention of damaging, trespassing, or otherwise altering your facility in any way. Interesting way of putting it. We sincerely apologize in advance to any inconvenience this may cause you. We are simply citizens practicing our First Amendment rights and are only involving you by happenstance. How polite for feces smearers, don't you think? The letter was postmarked January 29th, 2020, and mailed from Minnesota, but the Folger didn't receive it until almost 2 weeks after the insurrection, thanks, I guess, to Louis DeJoy. said Melanie Bender-Martin, a spokesperson for the library. The letter is now in the library's digital archive and will soon be made accessible to the public in the physical archive. Well, that's interesting. As a library, they say, we felt we had a duty to preserve the letter and make it available for future generations to reference, Martin said. The Folger, with the exception of its theater, is currently closed for renovations, but when it reopens in June, Martin said, any member of the public will be able to make an appointment to view the letter in the building's reading room. It appears the Folger was singled out by the letter writers. Bill Ryan, communications director for the Library of Congress, told the Washington Post, we have no record of receiving this letter or a letter like this of any kind. A picture of the letter is included in this. And then the weird analysis. It might seem odd that insurrectionists sent this letter to an institution that memorializes Shakespeare, but apparently the Bard's relationship to white nationalism, and specifically to white American identity, has long been documented by scholars, including those who have drawn comparisons between the playwright's work and the January 6th insurrection. There's some further analysis of this concept, which I encourage you to take a look at and see whether you think it's, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's very likely true and probably pretty well documented. I don't know if it was what really motivated this letter, though. It might really be just that they're saying, look, we're going to be blockading you, but not because we believe you're connected to the government, but just because you're inside of our perimeter. I think the bigger story here is they really thought that they were going to establish a 2.5-mile perimeter around the entire Capitol complex and capture and prevent the escape of members of Congress, and they knew that in December. And come on, it was an insurrection. Disqualify Trump. Jeez.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, I don't know if Justice Putnam has any more on that front in store for you, but I know he's got a great collection of stories, as always, from around the country and around the world, all coming up next right here on Netroots Radio as he brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That'll occupy the rest of your day. We'll see you again tomorrow.